Every collapse has a moment where leaving feels premature. In the mist, that moment comes inside the grocery store in Brigton, Maine, right after a violent storm ravaged a small town. Minutes earlier, the shelves were still stocked and the checkout lines were still moving. But now, the fog is starting to swallow the parking lot outside. Nobody in the store knew what was in the mist or just how bad things were really about to get. And that's exactly where we are. Before the monsters show up, before the crowd fractures. Just an ordinary person watching the fog roll in like everyone else in the building. So today, I want to answer a simple question. When did you have to leave and when was it even possible? To find that out, we're dropping you inside the grocery store as an ordinary person. Someone who just got into town for supplies after the storm and got trapped inside when the mist arrived. And on paper, the supermarket sounds like the best place to be. But that's what makes this scenario so dangerous. The store holds together just long enough for people to stop treating it like a stopgap and start treating it like a sanctuary. And by the time the cracks start showing, the window for planning a way out is already closing. Now, on the surface, the store looks like the right call. It has food, drinks, bathrooms, and enough space for everyone inside the building to ride things out till help arrives. So when the mist does roll in, it's not the worst place to find yourself trapped. The problem is that the building wasn't designed to withstand a siege. It might give you supplies, but it also makes you completely visible and vulnerable to anything outside that wants to get in. And being in a small town makes it hard to get a read on the situation early on. Because in a city, an emergency of this size would usually leave more of an obvious trail behind. You'd have police cars, fire trucks, and ambulances tearing down the roads, while everyone around you starts realizing something bigger is happening. In Brigton, the fog erases that view before you get that kind of build-up. In most outbreak media I cover on my main channel, the threat leaves traces you can follow if you're paying attention. Hospitals overflow first. Emergency vehicles start screaming through the streets. Roads lock up with abandoned cars, and the news gets stranger with every passing hour. Piece by piece, you can watch the pattern form in real time, but the mist strips all of that away. The second it rolls in around the store, the outside world is gone, until there's nothing left beyond the glass except a solid white wall swallowing every sense of distance. You can't tell if the fog stretches for a block or the entire town. So instead of trying to watch a collapse unfold around you, you're trapped inside a grocery store trying to judge a disaster you can no longer see. Alright, now let's talk about your escape windows, because the first one's a fork in the road. Dan Miller just burst through the door, bleeding and warning everyone that something in the mist just took John Lee. Another guy decides to hightail it out of there and make a run for his car, but a few moments later, the whole store hears him screaming somewhere outside. At this point, shutting the front door and staying inside makes perfect sense. The store has shelves full of food, a crowd that can watch multiple angles, and one massive advantage the parking lot just lost: visibility. So yeah, if you stayed here, I get it. I probably would too, at least for the moment. The movie also shows that leaving hasn't become impossible yet. A woman starts pleading for help to get home to her kids, but nobody moves, and the entire store watches her walk out into the mist alone. From inside the glass, she looks reckless as hell. She's heading out after 2 clear warnings that the fog is dangerous. And I'm sorry, real quick, has anybody else noticed all the Walking Dead characters in this movie? Anyways, funny enough, when the ending rolls around, the woman who left to get to her kids is seen alive on a military transport with her children. So that's pretty cool. But that doesn't turn her choice into some genius blueprint everybody should have copied. The movie never shows how far she went, what route she used, or whether she survived through good judgment, luck, or a blend of both. What it does show is that the store still had an escape window before the people inside started rotting into panic, faction building, and mob logic. So this isn't some obvious exit moment where everybody should have sprinted for the door. It's more of a fork in the road. One woman takes this insane looking option and lives. Everyone else takes the sensible option and stays in the store. So you can't really hate on them for staying, but settling into the store like the danger outside was the only threat ends up being a massive mistake. Now let's say you don't leave with that woman, fine. Most people wouldn't. But Dan's warning doesn't get to vanish from your decision making just because you chose to stay. At this point, the store has heard him say John Lee was taken, heard another man scream after running into the mist, and watched a mother walk out alone because her children were still at home. At this stage, I'm still not blindly charging into the mist because that would be a suicide run. Visibility is garbage, the threat profile is unknown, and something strong enough to snatch a grown-ass man is already somewhere in the mist, just outside the store. But sitting around and doing nothing is just as dangerous. This is the point where competent people start organizing before panic fully sets in. Somebody needs to figure out whose vehicles are closest to the entrance and which ones have fuel. Items like flashlights, ropes, first aid kits, radios, batteries, tools, blankets, water, and anything useful for moving through the low visibility should already be getting stacked near the exit. If somebody has a roadmap, grab it. If anybody knows the back roads out of town, speak up before half the county turns into Silent Hill. And for the love of God, somebody should have been checking broadcast immediately. Meanwhile, the mist is already swallowing everything they can see beyond the glass. And this is the second window most people miss, because waiting feels harmless while the shelves are stocked and the doors are still closed. The group keeps treating wasting time like a free resource when it's really burning away their easiest options minute by minute. By the time the danger becomes impossible for anyone sensible to dismiss, the mist already owns the roads, the parking lot, and most of the decisions they should have made earlier. Then the loading dock attack turns the store into a compromised position. Up to this point, the danger outside is still getting filtered through people's stories. Some saw something, some missed it, some buy it, and some keep acting like denial counts as security. Then Norm opens the loading dock, and the tentacles come through. Unfortunately, leaving right after that breach would still be ugly, since the mist is dangerous and nobody knows how far it stretches. But staying only makes sense if every spare minute is buying mobility. I'd be staging food, water, tools, and whatever defense gear they can carry, and getting ready to move the moment the next piece of evidence says the store has become a worse gamble than trying to leave. By nightfall, everyone is tired, scared, and trying to convince themselves the grocery store can carry them until the morning. Then the parking lot lights come on, and strange insects gather in front of the windows. After that, large winged creatures come out of the fog and dive straight for the bugs swarming around the lights. One of the bigger creatures smashes through the front glass, and the room loses control almost immediately. The bugs flood in, the larger creatures follow, and the crowd goes nuts. People scream, duck, and swing at anything moving and grab whatever looks useful. Ollie gets Amanda's revolver working and starts shooting the bigger things, which is easily the most competent move in the room. Everybody else starts reaching for fire because apparently fire indoors is a smart idea. That works exactly as it sounds. The flames drive some creatures back, but the store is crowded, panicked, and full of crap that burns. A girl that gets bitten dies, and earlier during this sequence, a bug lands on the character Cameron D, and it doesn't bite her. Which is terrible luck for everyone else because now the apocalypse has handed the loudest lunatic in the building a recruitment ad. Before this, Cameron D was just an annoying religious crank. After, frightened people have an image they can cling to. People start to reach out to her for comfort. By the time the attack ends, the store has lost another layer of safety, and I'd stop pretending those walls are some kind of magic force field. The loading dock already proved the back could fail if somebody opened the wrong access point. Now, the front has failed too, and it happened because the building was bright, occupied, and visible through the mist. That attack teaches a nasty lesson. The store can draw danger without anybody stepping outside. Its lights, its people, and its activity all reach into the fog and invite trouble back to the glass. And then the next sequence of events happens because a guy decided to turn himself into the Human Torch. He survives setting himself on fire, but the supermarket doesn't have what they need. They need painkillers, antibiotics, and proper burn treatment. Unfortunately, the closest place to get that is a pharmacy across the parking lot. So the next morning, David takes a small group to cross over. The pharmacy run starts with a single group, single file moving through the mist, which is already the right instinct because getting separated in that parking lot would be a fucking disaster. They aren't casually crossing open pavement. They're pushing through a whiteout where distance barely exists, keeping tight enough that nobody drifts off and becomes another scream in the fog. The supermarket disappears behind them, the pharmacy finally appears ahead, and for a few seconds, the stupid little supply run looks like it might actually work out. At first, the pharmacy gives them exactly what they came for. David, Ollie, Irene, Amanda, and the others start checking the shelves for Joe's medicine, but the place is already screaming at them to leave. And then they find out. The pharmacy has actually been webbed over. Human bodies are cocooned inside, egg sacs hang through the building, and a military police officer from Arrowhead is still alive in the mess, stuck to the wall and barely able to talk. He mutters about soldiers and what happened. But before they can get more information out of him, the room starts cashing in every warning sign they ignored. The spider-like creatures attack, and now the medicine run turns into a fight for survival. People get hurt, some never make it back out, and Irene has to use fire to carve a way through for them. The survivors stagger back across the lot carrying some of the supplies. Unfortunately, Joe dies before any of the medicine could actually save him. So what did they buy with that trip besides trauma and a pharmacy full of creatures? They learn the mist isn't limited to ambushing people in open spaces. It lets creatures take over human buildings and turn them into breeding sites. By now, I'd stop calling the supermarket a safe holdout after seeing that. After the pharmacy, they now have enough evidence to move. They know the mist can get you killed. The loading dock already showed the store can be breached from the back. The night attack proved the lights and crowd can drag danger toward the front windows. The pharmacy proves nearby buildings are getting occupied and converted into nests. So staying in the grocery store is starting to look worse and worse by the minute. At this point, this is where David and a smaller group should probably leave. And this window to leave is kind of ugly, obviously. They still have to cross the lot, reach the vehicle, drive through the fog, deal with the blocked roads, and accept the car might die before they find anything out there. But knowing what they know now, the risk might be worth taking. And Cameron D is now gaining influence, but she hasn't fully locked the store down yet. David can still gather supplies, Ollie still has the revolver, and a compact group can move without begging the whole room for permission to leave. At this point, they definitely have enough reason to justify leaving. Outside, the mist had enough time to work its way into human spaces, and the pharmacy already showed how ugly that gets once normal buildings turn into a nest. After the pharmacy, the young troops in the store disappear. Jessup finds the other two dead in the back area, and once the crowd corners him, he tries to explain what little he knows. And just a little side note, I'm pretty sure this is the guy from The Force Unleashed. Anyways, he talks about the Arrowhead Project, rumors about the scientists opening a window into another dimension, and the possibility that the military caused whatever is now crawling around outside. Cameron D grabs the admission and turns into a public execution pitch. And then she gets their followers to throw him outside as a sacrifice. That's when the store becomes dangerous in a different kind of way. Earlier, leaving meant surviving the parking lot. Now, leaving means getting past the people who may treat departure like betrayal. The door is still sitting there, but the social path is closing fast. David eventually gets a small crew together, but the delay is what screws him. At this point in the movie, Karma D's already gained too much power. You've already waited far too long to try and leave. Regardless, the next morning, David's group tries to slip out quietly. They've packed supplies, picked a Land Cruiser, and kept the group small enough to move fast. That's the right idea. Unfortunately, Carmody was already onto them before they can get away. She then rallies her followers and tells them that David's group has to be sacrificed. And the room starts tightening around David's people like a bad crowd at a prison riot. Fortunately, Ollie puts a bullet between Carmody's eyes, and the shock buys David's group a few precious seconds to move. They bolt for the parking lot, but the delay has already poisoned the escape. Ollie reaches the vehicle and gets it open, only to be attacked before he can climb in. Others get killed by creatures in the mist. But what's left of David's crew gets in the Land Cruiser and gets away. But the group has already paid the bill they might have avoided by moving before the store turned into a cult. That's why the pharmacy window carries a lot of weight. Before Cameron gets a grip on the survivors inside of the store, they still had an opportunity to leave the building with supplies, a compact team, and a plan. Once David's crew finally leaves, the movie stops being about whether the grocery store can hold. That answer is long gone. Now, the question is what the delay ended up costing them. David doesn't ride off into the sunset. He first goes home to check on his wife Stephanie and finds that she didn't survive. After that, there's no home base left, no rescue point they understand, and no plan beyond driving south through a world they can barely see. The road gives them the final scale of the problem. They pass wreckage, abandoned vehicles, and signs that the outside world had been torn apart while they were inside that grocery store arguing. Then a giant creature moves through the mist at a scale far beyond anything they saw from the grocery store. And then the Land Cruiser eventually runs out of fuel. That is the final cost of leaving too late. They escaped the store, but they left after the pharmacy failed, after Cameron turned the room violent, after the parking lot killed more people, and after the group had already been torn down past clear judgment. So when the vehicle dies and the tank is empty, David believes the only thing still coming is another creature out of the fog. Inside the Land Cruiser, the group reaches a point where they can't take uncertainty anymore. The ammunition is almost gone, the fuel is finished, and every stage of escape has stripped away another layer of hope. So David makes the worst decision in the movie. He uses the remaining bullets to kill Billy, Amanda, Irene, and Dan before the creatures can reach them. And then he steps out of the vehicle expecting the mist to take him. But then the military arrives. Civilians are being evacuated while the army pushes through with heavy equipment and organized force, burning back the infestation as the mist starts to clear. Survivors are being transported out, and among them is the woman who left the store earlier to reach her children. That's the price they paid for not acting sooner. Alright, so what would have decided survival here? Early on, the store bought them breathing room. But after the pharmacy run, it started eating through their ability to act. By then, they had enough evidence to leave, and every extra hour spent waiting made the mist outside nastier, the crowd inside more dangerous, and the people still capable of escaping less able to handle one more stretch of uncertainty. So looking back at the fog, the monsters, and the absolute collapse of the grocery store, when did you actually have to leave? Right after the pharmacy run. That was your absolute last train out. Leaving with the first woman who walked into the mist was a blind gamble, and staying during the initial panic was just a basic survival instinct. You don't walk out into zero visibility when monsters are snatching people from the loading dock. The grocery store should have been used as a stopgap or a staging zone. By the time the pharmacy team limps back, you already have enough proof to move. You know the building can be breached, you know the lights pull danger towards the glass, and you know nearby buildings are turning into nests. And most importantly, you can watch Cameron turning frightened people into a mob right in front of you. If you leave right then, you leave with supplies, a stronger group, a working vehicle, and most of your judgment still intact. The road is dangerous and the mist is still packed with nightmares, but at least you're making an active choice instead of waiting for the supermarket to rot around you. Since David waits until the crowd forces his hand, he loses more than time, fuel, and people. He also loses the mental endurance he needs for the road. By the time the Land Cruiser runs dry, his group's been dragged through a breach, a swarm, a spider nest, a cult takeover, and the sight of a world smashed apart beyond the store. David has already been worn down by the delay inside of the supermarket. The military arriving at the end lands like a kick to the teeth. Proves the scenario's golden rule. When your shelter starts costing you options, it's time to leave. If you wait until the building forces you out, you may reach the road with too little left in the tank, physically and mentally, to survive what comes next. Alright guys, if you made it to the end, I appreciate that very much, and I don't actually have another video for you because this is the first video on the channel. Unless you're watching it later, then there might be a video somewhere here on the screen, but for now, I actually have a playlist of a lot more just like this on my main channel. Same format, but only zombies, because that's actually where I got my start. Anyways, catch you next week, guys.